The sky above the Alari Palace was covered with soft golden clouds. Twin suns lit the shining towers of the capital. It was the day of the peace summit, the day humans and Alari would finally sit together after years of war. Inside the palace, the royal court was filled with nobles wearing bright robes. The walls were made of silverstone and smooth crystal. Tall banners of the Alari Empire hung down, and gentle music played in the background. Queen Valari sat on her high throne. Her crown was shaped like the wings of a falcon. She held her head high and kept her face calm. But inside, she was uneasy. The summit meant peace. Peace was good for her empire, but it also meant old memories might return, memories she had buried. She glanced at the court doors. They were tall and wide, made of black wood from a distant moon. Beyond them, the human delegation waited. A group of guards stood ready to open them. One of her advisors, a quiet man named Doran, stepped forward. "Your Majesty," he said, "the humans are ready to enter." Valari nodded. "Let them come." The doors opened with a deep sound, and the music stopped. All eyes turned as the human delegation walked in. Their leader was a calm woman with gray eyes. Behind her walked 3 others. They wore simple clothes with Earth's crest on the chest. Their steps were slow but proud. And then came the 4th human. He walked at the back, tall and quiet, his eyes straight ahead. Valari's breath caught in her throat. She knew that face. The world seemed to slow down round her. The same eyes, the same strong steps, the same sharp jaw. It was him, the soldier, the one she had captured during the war, the one who had destroyed her fleet's strongest ship with only a small crew, the one she had sent to a secret prison deep in the frost lands of Mirax-9. No one had escaped that place. No one. But here he was. Alive. Standing in her court. Valari's hands tightened on the arms of her throne. Her heart pounded. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The human looked up at her. Their eyes met. His face was calm. His eyes held no anger, only quiet strength. Valari tried to look away, but she couldn't. Her voice came out without warning. A loud, sharp scream echoed through the court. Everyone turned toward the queen in shock. The music stopped. The Alari nobles stared. The human diplomats paused. Valari stood from her throne. Her legs shook slightly. She looked at the human soldier again. He did not move. He simply stood there, still and quiet. The room fell into silence. Only the soft wind outside could be heard. The queen sat back down slowly. She forced herself to speak. I was not expecting this, she said, trying to control her voice. The lead human stepped forward, confused. "Is something wrong, Your Majesty?" Valari quickly shook her head. "No, nothing. Please, continue." But her voice had lost its strength. The humans took their places at the round table in the center of the court. The soldier remained standing, his hands behind his back, saying nothing. Valari could feel his presence. She couldn't stop thinking about how he had survived. How had he escaped? Why was he here now? Was this a warning? She looked to Doran, who gave her a puzzled glance. He didn't understand either. The meeting began. Talks of peace, trade, and future plans filled the room. But Valari heard little. Her mind kept going back to the past, back to the battle, back to the decision she had made, back to the order she gave, silent, secret, final. And now that order had returned in human form. Alive. Unbroken. And standing in her court. The human soldier's name had been Miran. If she remembered right. Yes, that was it. Miran. The one they couldn't defeat in battle. The one who caused more trouble than an entire human fleet. And now, he had come not with weapons, but with silence. It was not anger that filled Valari's heart. It was fear. Because she knew something others did not. If Miran was alive, then the truth might come next. And truth was more dangerous than war. The peace summit continued in the great hall of the Alari Palace. Smiles were exchanged. Agreements were discussed. Cups of starfruit tea were passed around. On the surface, everything looked calm and proper. But Queen Valari's hands were cold. She sat on her throne, nodding at the words of her ministers, but her thoughts were not in the room. They were stuck in a moment from years ago back when the war burned across systems. And the name Miran had reached her ears for the first time. Miran. That same human now standing in her court, silent and calm. He should not have been there. He should not have been anywhere. She had made sure of it. That day, long ago. He had been captured by Alari scouts after leading a bold attack on one of their largest warships. The attack had confused even the finest Alari minds. A small crew of humans had somehow tricked the Alari fleet. Miran's name had spread through the war councils like fire through dry grass. When he was brought to the queen, bound and bruised, she had looked into his eyes. He did not beg. He did not speak. He only stared back at her, steady and calm, no fear. She remembered how her advisors had begged her to keep him as a prisoner of war. He can be useful, one had said. He can be studied, said another. But Valari had feared what he represented. If one human soldier could outsmart her fleets, what else were they capable of? So she made a quiet decision. She signed a sealed order. Miran was sent to Mirax 9, a frozen moon far from any sun, a prison without walls because no one could survive the cold outside. The prisoners were left there in deep bunkers, forgotten by the galaxy. He was meant to disappear. His name was to be erased, and now he had returned. Valari's fingers trembled slightly as she lifted her cup. She took a sip, though she tasted nothing. She had to think clearly. If anyone found out what she had done, it could destroy her reign. Alari law was strict about secret orders. Sending a prisoner to a place like Mirax 9 without trial was not. Just forbidden, it was dishonorable. Her heart pounded louder than the words spoken around her. Miran had not said a word about the past. Not to her. Not to anyone. But he did not need to. His presence was enough. It was a quiet reminder that the truth never stayed buried forever. She had to find out how he survived that night, after the court was cleared and the guests had returned. To their quarters, Valari called for her most trusted advisor, Doran. He came quickly, bowing low. "You called for me, Your Majesty?" he asked. Valari looked at the long silver window beside her throne. The twin moons were rising above the city. "Yes," she said softly. "I need you to look into something." She did not explain everything. She only gave Doran one name, Miran. Doran's eyes narrowed slightly. "The human soldier?" She nodded. Double quotes. "There are no records of him in our war files," Doran said. "It is as if his history has been removed." Valari stayed quiet. "I will search the deeper archives," he said, sensing the weight in her voice. "Do it quietly." Valari added, "No one must know." He bowed again and left. The queen stood slowly and walked down the empty hall toward her private chamber. Her long cloak dragged softly behind her. In her chamber, she sat near a warm light stone and closed her eyes. How had Miran survived Mirax 9? Even Alari guards could not stay there for long. The cold was sharper than steel. The air was thin. Supplies were rare. Unless someone had helped him. Unless he had escaped on his own. That thought chilled her more than the moon's wind. The next morning, Valari returned to the court hall. The second day of the summit had begun. Again, the human delegation entered. Again, Miran walked silently at the back. He said nothing. He looked at no one for long. But his silence was heavier than any speech. Some Alari nobles had begun to whisper. "Who is that man? Why does the queen seem disturbed when he enters? What is his story?" Tarin, a young aide in the royal court, had noticed it too. He had sharp eyes and a curious heart. While the others focused on trade and treaties, Tarin had started asking questions. That evening, Tarin walked to the royal library. It was deep under the palace, guarded by ancient codes and watchers made of crystal and light. Tarin used his access scroll and entered. The room was filled with glowing shelves and hovering data stones. He searched the name Miran. At first, nothing came up. No files, no records, no battle reports. That made him more curious. He tried again, this time using older methods, going through files by hand, using dates from the war period. Hours passed. And then he found it, a sealed folder, unopened. For years, he placed his hand over the mark and felt a gentle hum. The seal was old, but real. He opened it carefully. Inside was a brief report. Human soldier Miran, captured after the Vetrax battle, sent to Mirax 9 by royal order. Status, unknown. Terran's eyes widened. Royal order. That meant the queen herself had decided this. Why? Why would she send one human soldier to such a place? He looked at the summit schedule. Tomorrow would be the final day, and Tarin had a feeling it would not be like the others. The morning of the final day arrived. Soft light poured into the Alari court through the high crystal windows. The peace summit was coming to an end. Words of progress had been shared. Smiles had been exchanged. But one truth still stood quietly in the center of it all. Miran, the human soldier who had come back from a place no one returned from. The one Queen Velari had once sent away in silence. He still had not spoken of it. Not to the court, not to the press. Not even to the human diplomats he traveled with. But his silence was not empty. It was full of something that could not be ignored. He entered the court again, calm and steady, like he had done the past 2 days. His face was quiet, but there was a strong light in his eyes. It was not pride. It was not anger. It was something else, something peaceful, but unshakable. Tarin sat at the edge of the royal hall. He watched Miran carefully. The sealed file he had found still echoed in his mind. A soldier taken to Mirax 9 by royal order. A name erased from the records. Now, that man was walking freely into the heart of Alari power. Tarin's thoughts raced. Why was Miran silent? Why hadn't he spoken of the past? Why did he come here at all? The court session began. The last items of the treaty were being discussed: joint missions, cultural exchanges, peace patrols. But slowly, the focus shifted. An Alari noble with golden cuffs raised a question. I would like to ask something, he said, looking directly at the human group. The court turned quiet. He continued. This man who stands behind you, who is he? He wears no rank. He gives no words, yet he walks with purpose. I have seen the queen watch him closely. Miran looked at the speaker, but said nothing. The human leader smiled politely. This is Miran. He is one of our observers. A former soldier. Former. The noble asked, what did he do in the war? There was a pause. Miran stepped forward slowly. I served as a scout captain, he said simply. His voice was steady and clear. It was the first time most in the court had heard it. Tarin leaned forward. His heart beat faster. Others listened closely now. The noble continued. And what happened to you after the war? Where were you? Miran looked at him, then turned his eyes toward the queen. She sat tall, but her fingers gripped the armrests of her throne tightly. I was captured, Miran replied. I was taken to a place with no name, a frozen moon. No guards, no comfort, just cold and silence. The hall fell quiet. A soft sound came from the queen's lips, a breath held too long. Miran did not look at her again. I survived, he said. I do not speak of it to accuse. I speak of it because silence should not last forever. Tarin felt the weight of those words settle over the court. Silence should not last forever. Another noble asked carefully, how did you escape such a place? I walked, Miran said. When the food ended, I searched the ice. When the wind cut my skin, I kept moving. I followed the stars until I reached an old mining station. I fixed a broken signal. Earth heard it, and they came. The nobles whispered to each other. Even the human delegates looked surprised. They had not heard the story either. Queen Velari spoke at last. Why did you come here, Miran? She asked. Her voice was calm, but her eyes searched him like a question with no answer. Miran turned toward her. His voice remained quiet. To remind. Velari's brow furrowed. Remind of what? That peace is not built by forgetting, he replied. It is built by facing what was hidden. The queen stood slowly. Her long robe moved like water around her. You speak of many things, she said, but you do not speak of names. You do not speak of blame. Miran gave a slow nod. I do not need to. The past speaks loud enough. Tarin looked around. The Alari nobles were no longer whispering. They were listening, really listening. The queen sat again. Her face was unreadable. The session ended, but no one clapped. The silence at the end spoke more than applause ever could. Later that day, in the garden halls outside the court, Tarin approached Miran. "Can I ask you something?" he said gently. Miran looked at him and gave a small nod. "I read the records." Tarin said, "I know where you were sent. I know who signed the order." Miran did not respond. "But you didn't mention it," Tarin continued. "Why?" Miran looked up at the sky. The twin suns were soft now, lowering behind the towers. "I didn't come for revenge," he said. "I came so that someone like me doesn't end up forgotten again." Tarin nodded slowly. "Will you speak more of it?" Miran shook his head. "No, I have said enough. Now it is her turn." Tarin watched as Miran walked away down the path, quiet and calm. And somewhere deep in the royal palace, Queen Velari stood alone in her chamber. A file sat on her table. Her own order, her own signature. She stared at it for a long time. The past could not be erased, and the court would soon expect answers. The palace grew quieter as the final day of the summit passed. Guests returned to their quarters. Talks had ended, papers were signed, and handshakes had been shared. But no one forgot what happened in the court that day. Miran's words still echoed in many minds, especially in Tarin's. He couldn't sleep. He walked through the quiet halls of the palace with a small light in his hand, thinking of Miran's story, the sealed file, and the look on the queen's face when Miran had spoken of the frozen moon. Tarin was not a warrior. He had never seen battle, but he knew one thing very well: records never lie. That night, he returned to the royal archive. The deep halls under the palace were guarded by silence. Only the gentle hum of the light stones filled the air. Tall shelves stretched into the darkness, each holding the history of the Alari Empire. Tarin made his way to the sealed section. It was only for trusted royal aides and members of the Queen's Council. He placed his hand over the mark again. The door unlocked with a soft click. Inside, he searched carefully. He found more files about Mirax-9. Most of them were simple reports, weather data, prisoner lists, supply records. But then he found something different, a message, short, hidden. Inside a supply log. It read, "Prisoner 017M has repaired signal dish. Escape likely. No further action taken. Weather too severe for patrol. Prisoner 017M." That was Miran. Tarin read the line again. The guards had known he might escape, but they had not tried to stop him. Why? Because of the cold, because no one cared. He closed the file slowly. Then he found another report. This one had the Queen's seal. Prisoner 017M to be removed from all records. Order signed by the Crown. No trial. No return. Tarin's heart beat faster. It was true. The Queen had ordered it herself. She had broken Alari law to erase Miran. And now, years later, he had come back alive. Tarin stepped back from the shelf, holding the file in his hands. His thoughts were heavy. Should he take it to the court? Should he hide it? Should he tell Miran? The next morning, Queen Velari sat in her chamber. She had not slept either. Her eyes were tired, and her thoughts would not rest. She held the same sealed report in her hand, her own order, the truth written in her own name. A silent knock came at her door. "Enter," she said softly. It was Doran, her advisor. He stepped forward and bowed. "I have completed the search, Your Majesty." Velari looked up. "You found the truth?" Doran nodded once. "Yes, it is as you feared. Miran survived. The order was carried out, but he escaped, and now it cannot be hidden any longer." The Queen stood slowly. She looked at the sunlight pouring through her tall window. "If this truth becomes public," she said, "the court will demand action. They will say I broke the law. They will not be wrong." Doran replied gently. Velari closed her eyes for a moment. "And if I confess," Doran looked unsure, "some will respect it, others may not. But the court follows strength. If you speak first, they may listen." The Queen nodded. She had made mistakes, but she would not hide any more. She sent a message to the royal court. There would be one final gathering before the human delegates left. That afternoon, the court hall filled once more. No music played, no banners hung. This was not for celebration. It was for truth. Miran stood again at the edge of the room, calm and quiet. His eyes followed no one. He waited. The nobles filled their seats. The humans sat silently beside their Alari hosts. Then Queen Velari entered. She wore no crown, no robe, just a simple dress of deep blue. She stood at the center, not on the throne. "I have asked you all to gather here," she said, her voice clear and strong, "because something must be spoken before peace can truly begin." The hall was still. "There is a man among us," she said, turning her eyes toward Miran, "who should not be here, not because he is wrong, but because I once decided to make him disappear." Gasps spread across the room. Taran sat up straight. The queen continued, "During the war, I ordered the silent removal of a human soldier. He was taken without trial, sent to a frozen moon, a place no one was expected to return from." Miran's face did not change. "I feared what he represented," she said. "His courage, his sharp mind, his quiet strength. I feared that one man could change the story of the war. So I tried to erase him." She paused, letting her words hang in the air. "But he returned. He stood here, not in anger, but in silence. And his silence was louder than any weapon." The nobles whispered to each other again. "I did not ask for forgiveness," Velari said. "I ask that you remember that peace is not built by shadows, but by truth." Then she did something no one expected. She stepped down from the platform and walked toward Miran. When she reached him, she bowed her head. It was the first time an Alari queen had bowed to a human. Miran nodded once, not with pride, not with victory, but with quiet respect. In the quiet that followed, something changed. The court, the peace, the future, everything felt new. Not because the past was forgotten, but because it had finally been faced. The court was not the same after that day. Whispers filled the palace halls. Servants spoke softly behind closed doors. Nobles walked slower, thinking deeply. Even the guards stood taller, more alert, as if the air had grown heavier with meaning. Queen Velari had told the truth in front of the court. A royal mistake had been admitted, and the human soldier she once tried to remove had not spoken a single unkind word. He had listened. He had waited. And in the end, he had been heard. Now the question in everyone's mind was not about the queen. It was about him. Who was Miran? Really? Why had he come back? What did he want? He had not asked for apology. He had not asked for power. He had not even asked for attention. Yet he had changed the entire summit. One evening, a small group of Alari nobles gathered in the quiet garden near the moonlit fountains. Among them was a young noble named Relan, who had once served on a warship during the early days of the conflict with Earth. "I remember the name Miran," Relan said, stirring the glowing leaves in his cup. "He was spoken of among our fleet leaders. They said he moved like wind and planned like fire. Not loud, not wild, just exact. Every step, every strike meant something." The others listened. Another noble, older and slower, nodded. "I was at the council when news of his capture was brought. There was confusion, then silence, and then his name vanished. Until now," someone whispered. Relan looked up at the stars. "I would like to speak to him, not as a noble, as someone who wants to understand." The next day, Relan approached Miran in the outer court. The human was sitting alone, near the edge of the palace gardens, watching a group of Alari children chase light birds across the grass. "May I sit?" Relan asked. Miran looked at him and nodded once. Relan sat beside him quietly for a moment before speaking. "When you stood in the court," he said, "and said nothing, I understood something for the first time. That silence is not always weakness. Sometimes it is stronger than shouting." Miran gave a small smile. "Words are easy. Silence takes weight." Relan nodded. "I served during the war. I followed orders. I never questioned anything. But after hearing your story, I began to wonder what we were truly fighting." Miran looked out at the sky. "You were fighting fear. So were we." Relan turned toward him. "Why did you really come to the summit? Why face the one who sent you away? Miran was quiet for a moment. I didn't come to point fingers, he said. I came because I believe peace without truth is no peace at all, real and studied. His face, there was no hate in his eyes, no fire, just calm, steady purpose. Would you tell us your story? Reelan asked. Not the court, just a few of us. We want to learn. Miran nodded. Then come tomorrow. Bring only those who listen. With open hearts. That evening, in a small side chamber of the palace, 5 Alari nobles gathered with Miran. No guards, no recording stones, no royal robes, just quiet space. Miran stood before them and began to speak, not in anger, not to accuse, but to share. He told them how he had joined the human fleet as a young scout. He had never planned to be a soldier. He was a farmer's son who knew how to read stars and repair old machines. But when war came, he was needed. He spoke of the mission that changed everything, the one where his small crew used the quiet side of a gas moon to surprise an Alari battleship, not to destroy, but to disable its engines and save a nearby colony. He told them how they had been caught later, how he alone survived the ambush, and how he had been taken without trial to a frozen place with no name. Mirax-9. He spoke of the cold, of the silence, of the long days with no food, of teaching himself to fix the broken signal dish with nothing but a scrap of wire and a piece of heated metal. He spoke of waiting in the dark, unsure if anyone would hear the signal. And then he spoke of the moment a human ship came weeks later and pulled him from the edge of death. The nobles listened with full hearts. Some had tears in their eyes. You could have come back full of hate, one said. I could have, Miran replied. But hate is another kind of prison. I already lived in one. The next morning, Reelan stood before the queen. I asked that we record Miran's story in the royal archive, he said. Not as a warning, but as a lesson. Let the future learn. From the silence we once buried. The queen looked at him with tired but clear eyes. Yes, she said. Let it be done. That same day, Miran stood once more at the edge of the court, ready to leave. The human delegation had finished their stay. The ships were ready. The peace treaty would hold. But before they departed, the queen walked to him once more. This time, she did not speak. She held out a small scroll, a royal document. He took it and read it silently. It was a formal letter of recognition. Not of war, not of apology. But of strength, signed by her hand. Miran nodded. Then he looked back at the palace. One last time. He had come from the cold. He had walked through silence. And now, his story would not be forgotten. The sun was setting over the capital city of the Alari Empire. The sky was painted with soft reds and purples as the twin moons began to rise. The palace was quieter than usual. The peace summit had ended, but its effects would be felt for a long time. Queen Valari stood in her private chamber, looking out over the city. Her hands were folded calmly, but her mind was restless. The past days had changed everything. The truth about Miran, the human soldier she had once tried to erase, was now known to all. She felt the weight of her choices, the secret order she had signed, the silent removal of a man who had shown more courage than many Alari warriors. Now, the court had heard the story. Nobles had listened, some with respect, others with doubt. But Valari knew the hardest part was still ahead. What would she do now? Would she try to regain her power by silencing the truth again? Or would she face the consequences and lead her people into a new era? Her advisor, Doran, entered quietly. Your Majesty, he said softly, the court awaits your decision. Valari turned to him. I will speak to them, she said. I will not hide behind my crown any longer. Doran bowed his head. You have their respect, Your Majesty. They will listen. The next morning, the royal court gathered once more. This time, there was no music, no banners, no celebration. The room was filled with a quiet tension. Valari entered, her face calm and determined. She walked slowly to the center of the room. The nobles and guests fell silent. She raised her hand for attention. My people, she began. The past days have shown us the power of truth, a truth I once tried to hide. She looked at Miran, standing quietly near the edge of the court. I made a choice during the war, she said. A choice to send a soldier to a place no one should go without trial or chance. A choice I regret. The room was still. Valari took a deep breath. I asked for forgiveness not for myself alone, but for the mistakes we all made in war. She paused, letting her words settle. More important, I asked for a new beginning, a future where we do not hide from our past but learn from it. Miran stepped forward, his voice calm and clear. Peace is built on truth and trust, he said, not on silence or fear. The court nodded. A young noble, Relan, spoke next. We have much to learn from this, not only about humans, but about ourselves. The queen smiled softly. Then let us move forward together. After the meeting, Valari spoke privately with Miran. You did not ask for punishment or revenge, she said. I did not come for that, Miran replied. I came because truth matters. Valari looked at him with new respect. You have changed my view of humanity, and you have changed my view of the Alari, Miran said. They both smiled. In the days that followed, the palace was filled with new energy. Plans for joint missions, cultural exchanges, and shared knowledge were made. Humans and Alari began to meet not as enemies, but as partners. Valari worked hard to rebuild trust among her people. She knew it would take time, but she was ready. One evening, she stood on the balcony of her chamber, looking at the stars. Miran's words stayed with her. Peace is built on truth and trust. She whispered the words to herself. The future was uncertain. But for the first time in many years, it felt full of hope. The day had come. The human delegation was preparing to leave the Alari capital. Ships were ready in the great spaceport. The peace treaty was signed and accepted. The future between Earth and the Alari looked brighter than ever. But the court gathered one last time before the departure. The large hall was filled with Alari nobles, human diplomats, and guests from many worlds. The air was thick with hope and respect. The walls, once cold and distant, seemed warmer under the soft light of the twin suns. Queen Valari stood before the crowd. She wore her simple blue dress again. No crown, no royal robes. Her eyes looked calm but full of strength. She raised her hand for silence. This is a moment unlike any other in our history, she said. A moment where we meet as equals, not as enemies. The crowd listened closely. She turned to Miran, who stood quietly at her side. Miran has shown us much, she continued, not just about humanity, but about courage, survival, and the power of truth. Miran nodded slightly, his face calm. Valari's voice grew stronger. I once feared what he represented. I tried to erase him from our story, but the story cannot be changed by hiding its pages. She paused. Today, I stepped down as your queen. Gasps filled the room. Valari smiled gently. It is time for new leadership, one that will carry us into a future of peace and understanding. She walked to a small platform at the side of the room. There, a young noble named Relan stepped forward. He was chosen by the council to be the new leader. Relan looked at the crowd. We honor the past and the future today, he said. We will build bridges, not walls. The crowd erupted in quiet applause. Miran stepped forward. He spoke for the first time in the open court, his voice steady and clear. Thank you for listening. Thank you for courage. The future is not written by one voice or one people. It is written by all of us together. The crowd listened in silence, then slowly. Applause grew louder. Later, outside the palace, Miran stood beside the spaceport ramp. The ship that would take him and his delegation home waited quietly. Queen Valari came to him. You changed more than the court, she said softly. You changed me. Miran smiled. Peace is not a prize. It is a journey. Valari nodded. May your journey be long and strong. She stepped back and watched as the ship's engines glowed softly. The crowd cheered as the ship lifted into the sky, moving toward the stars. Back inside the palace, the new leader, Relan, began his first duties. He opened the royal archive and placed Miran's story on the main display. It was no longer hidden or secret. It was a lesson for all to see. He spoke to the council. We will remember that strength comes not from war, but from truth and respect. The Alari people began to look at humans differently. Stories spread of Miran's courage, not as a soldier alone, but as a symbol of hope. Years passed. Humans and Alari traveled between stars together. They built schools, traded knowledge, and shared stories. Miran's quiet bravery became a legend, and Queen Valari's choice to face her past was remembered as the day the Alari began a new chapter. The stars shone bright above the palace once more. The past was honored. The future was hopeful, and humanity's voice had been heard.